everybody. Welcome back inside the NFL Combine. Matthew Coller here, and welcoming back to the show, Bobby Peters. And guess what? It's been years. We've been trying to get Bobby Peters to write about the Minnesota Vikings offense. He would come on the show and like, oh yeah, I wrote a book about the Lions. I wrote a book about the Packers. And be like, any time now is fine, Bobby. Well, you have written a dozen books about offenses in the NFL. They are the most detailed and insightful breakdowns of NFL offenses, and I have loved your insight on the show for a very long time. But now you got a Vikings one, the 2024 Minnesota Vikings Complete Offensive Manual, and you are doing the Alert the Post newsletter as well that people can go check out. So guess what we're going to talk about? The Minnesota Vikings offense. Bobby, here's a great place to start. If J.J. McCarthy is the quarterback and not Sam Darnold for next year, how good is that for him? How good is that for J.J. McCarthy in terms of this offense? How can it make life easier? What are the challenges for a young quarterback? Give me if J.J. is the quarterback, what does it look like with Kevin O'Connell's offense?
That's a great question. Thank you for the nice intro. Great question, and I think we got to look back to all the great coaching that he's done the last 2 years, 2+ years really. Obviously, Kirk Cousins was playing fantastic before he got hurt last year. Dobbs comes in, plays fantastic. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell adjusted his system for the new quarterback coming off the street. And then this year, with Sam Darnold, he's never really had a good season, right? I mean, he's been cast off. He was a backup for a few years, backup in San Francisco the year prior, and he had a fantastic season. So I think Kevin O'Connell has shown the ability to adapt the offense to the quarterback. Obviously, it helps having two outstanding wide receivers and an outstanding tight end that they like to feature early and often in progressions as well. So that's going to help. And I think the bones of the offense will probably be the same. I think probably 70-80% of the concepts will be the same. But I think where they pick and choose the next 20 to 30% will be very specific to J.J. McCarthy. And then I think within that 70 to 80% also, I think McCarthy's going to find different receivers than Darnold was, just seeing the field differently, right? Every quarterback sees the field differently.
I definitely thought that in training camp that J.J. McCarthy saw the middle of the field better and the underneath stuff better, and I think we'll be more willing to check down because sometimes I felt like, Sam, it's okay, dude. Just check down to T.J. Hawkinson or Josh Oliver or your running back, and everything will be fine. And he seemed to always want to hunt that deep shot, which is also KOC as well, wanting to hunt the deep shots and explosives. But let's go back to what you said about changing the offense from Kirk to Sam Darnold. What did you feel like was different there? Because I thought that Kirk was good at finding his underneath stuff, and he had this great chemistry with Hawkinson, which didn't really exist with Darnold, but Darnold down the field to Justin Jefferson was so willing to take those shots into tighter windows down the field.
I think it was an overall philosophical coming from the top down. I think the offensive design, 4 to 5 times a game, they would tweak base concepts to take advantage of what defenses were doing and make throws and attempt throws that like a lot of teams in the NFL just wouldn't attempt, right? Or by design, or whether the quarterback would be limited or not. But I think there was a clear attempt from within the offensive structure to take those shots downfield. And I think and obviously my book goes into great detail on the specifics of it, but like they would take like a base concept that like McVay and Shanahan and those guys would run, and then they would tweak it and add a different route to take advantage of certain things. And it was a lot of fun to study from that standpoint. I mean, they were incredibly explosive with their 5 and 7 step pass concepts.
No, I know, and that's the thing about the way that the season ended versus the way we saw it play out in the regular year, because what Kevin O'Connell was able to do with Sam Darnold's arm talent was nothing short of spectacular for the vast majority of the season, and eventually the wheels came off because they couldn't block it up and because Darnold didn't play very well against the Detroit Lions. But when we go through the majority of the season, finding Jefferson downfield was their go-to. That's how they won football games. I do wonder if that changes quite a bit with J.J. McCarthy for where Jefferson is deployed. And I've always been fascinated between the relationship between KOC and Jefferson, because that's his cheat code. That's his thing that he can do that nobody else can do because he's got the best in the world. Do you think it'll be different? Like what did you observe? Because he was so a downfield receiver that at times I got frustrated. I was like, you just need to get the ball in his hands. But then other times he's catching 97-yard touchdowns from the goal line. So how might that advance with a different quarterback?
So one thing that I think will carry over, and I think this kind of informs the discussion, is what Kevin O'Connell does is within any given play call, he will move Justin Jefferson, for the most part, depending on the concept, from receiver X, Y, Z, F, whatever, right? Like he moves him around really well within the concept. So a lot of times, obviously, if you've got a receiver like Justin Jefferson, you want to make him the first read in the progression. You want the quarterback looking at him first when he gets to the top of his drop. Other times, you want to use him as like a backside receiver, so that way when Darnold or McCarthy gets to the top of their drop, they're getting the ball out quicker to a receiver who's getting single covered. So if you're playing, I think it was the second matchup against the Lions. The Lions were playing a ton of man coverage, but they were cheating their safety over to Jefferson. So in that case, okay, if we know we're getting this look, let's put Jefferson on the backside or have him run a check down or something of that sort and make one of the other receivers the primary. And when you do that, now the ball's getting out quicker, right? Because if you always made Jefferson the first read for Darnold and he's getting double teamed, well, now Darnold's holding the ball longer, and as a quarterback, you have that mental clock, and it starts to frustrate you if you're not getting the ball out to your first read in your progression often.
I guess I want to know how flexible you think that this is within a game. Because something that comes up all the time, and I can't decide whether there's validity to it or if it's really just a standard football thing we think when something doesn't work out, which is, did he adjust in real time? Because I have felt at times through Kevin O'Connell's time here that there has been a little bit of, even if something's not working, they're going to keep going back to it down the field, even though that is their best thing that they do. So I go back and forth. Like, am I just judging the results and not really the process, or do they need to be better in their quick game and things like that? And, I think it's one of the hardest things to parse out is, were they doing the right thing? Can they actually be flexible? Or is it better to just for example, in basketball, I think we would all say, especially you and I are about the same age, like, shoot a mid-range jumper, man. Stop missing the three every time. But then a team gets hot for three, and then they rip off 48 points in the first quarter, and you're like, just like I told them, just keep shooting those threes. How much of that do you look at when you're breaking down this book with Kevin O'Connell?
I think it's a little of both. I think when it comes to in-game adjustments, right, if you have a game plan coming in to do one thing and you're expecting the defense to do that thing, and if the defense does that thing, you're going to stick with your game plan, right? Because you're like, okay, we practice this all week. Eventually, it's going to click, right? And it's something, you might get a holding penalty on the first drive, or something might happen where, it kind of derails you early in the game. So in that case, it's like, yeah, let's stick with the game plan. But if they come out and do something different, you better switch up what you're doing, right? You better adapt to what the defense presents to you. So I think, within each game, you definitely have to take a look at that, right? And I think in general, it was a little bit of both. From when we take a step back, and like my book is broken down by concept, when you look at the different concepts the Vikings use, they have a full menu. So they can adapt in-game. They can take those deep shots. They also have a quick game menu, which they've adapted to the modern NFL really well. And then one piece that I really like about their downfield concepts, their 5 and 7 step stuff where they're really trying to push the ball, is their check down distribution underneath. It always made sense. It always gave the quarterback answers underneath if that deep shot wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And one element in particular, something that I've studied with Ben Johnson the last couple of years too, is off play action. A lot of times teams will keep 6 or 7 in to protect, and you're really limiting yourself on where your quarterback can put the ball. What Kevin O'Connell and Ben Johnson do really well is they'll get 4 or 5 out every single time, and it really allows the quarterback to read a full field at that point.
Folks, I'm trying a new thing in order to stop ordering from fast food restaurants all the time with my busy schedule. It's called Tempo Meals. Tempo is a weekly delivery service that delivers chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu right to your door. Their perfectly portioned lunches and dinners take the guesswork out of eating as well. They're fully prepared, and they can be heated in the microwave in just 3 minutes. I got my first box, and wow. Talk about easy and delicious. I got sweet and tangy chicken, mozzarella marinara chicken, and barbecue chicken. Kind of a trend there, but there's so many more options than that. All of them tasted great for me, were super quick and easy to make. They were my choices out of dozens and dozens that took about 5 clicks to get set up with Tempo Meals. For a limited time, Tempo is offering my listeners 60% off your first box. Just go to tempomeals.com/Purple Insider. That is tempomeals.com/Purple Insider for 60% off your first box. Rules and restrictions apply. Right, because that's the thing we never really know when we see the results is, what was the quarterback supposed to do? And did he do something different than Kevin O'Connell would have dialed it up? And like when it comes to a check down or something, it's like, would Kevin O'Connell have said, hey, you got to just get rid of that football on some of those sacks? At the same time, Darnold was trying to make plays out of structure, which, as I'm sure you saw on tape, he did spectacularly a bunch of times until he couldn't anymore when Jared Verse and Kobe Turner and the blitzes and stuff were getting them with the Rams. But that's always a discussion that I go back and forth on, and in some ways I'm like, I agree with if you're sticking with the same thing and it's not working, then you have to make an adjustment, but also this is what you do best as an offense. Let's go back to J.J. McCarthy, though. How complicated is this? You look at, there's a stack of books over here of all the offenses that you have charted and written about. In comparison to other teams, how much of a mountain is it to climb for J.J. McCarthy to learn this, knowing that he has a year of understanding the X's and O's? If you want to show the camera the front of it, see, you got the J.J. McCarthy understands the this, but he doesn't have a lot of experience doing the throwing of the football, the footwork, the details, the full speed stuff, the getting hit part. How tough is this going to be?
I think it definitely takes time. I think obviously the coaching staff will pair what he does well in camp to the game plans. There's going to be definitely carry over there, and you want to make your quarterback comfortable. I don't think that full menu will be there. Obviously, like Darnold has a lot more experience than McCarthy, but I mean, who knows? Like McCarthy, he's from what I've heard, he's an intelligent guy. So I think what you touched on is the real crux of it, right? Can you take that classroom knowledge and can you bring it to the field? And I think, studying, comparing Kevin O'Connell's offense to all the other offenses, I think like the language structures and, the menu, I think is pretty similar from those standpoints. And it's just going to be how you fit it to the specific skill set of the quarterback.
I want to ask you about something that makes me sad, hurts my heart. It's the 2024, 2023, and 2022 Vikings run game. If you grew up in the 90s and you watch a run game like this, you just shake your head. You feel sad. It hasn't been good, Bobby. It just hasn't been good. And this is always another difficult thing to work through. They also haven't had a great interior offensive line, as I'm certain that you noticed. And they have not had running backs who are explosive. Dalvin Cook had lost a step very clearly, and then Alexander Mattison was just a bad decision. And Aaron Jones was good last year. There's no question he was good. But he didn't have very many of those home run type of runs. And I think the jolt isn't quite the same as it was early in his career. The ineffectiveness in the run game, how much was scheme? How much do they need to improve scheme-wise? Or is it legitimately just you need better players?
I think a big chunk of it is scheme. I think, obviously Kevin O'Connell comes from McVay and the Rams, right? So, like, you've got the 11 personnel duo, mid-zone, base, and he carried that over. But the multiplicity within it is nowhere near what Sean McVay does. And I think what the Vikings have done is, and my book I wanted to focus on it, is those 5 and 7 step pass concepts. They really expand on that. Like, that's their identity, right? That's who they want to be. And it's hard to be really good and really multiple within every aspect of your offense, right? And a lot of it is, Kevin O'Connell, he's darn good at coaching the 5 and 7 step stuff, and he's darn good at getting his players and different quarterbacks to see it well and to create an explosive pass game with it. So I think some of it is like there's so many eggs in the pass game basket that like the run game is kind of like, okay, we just do it to keep the defense honest. We're going to run duo. We're going to run some mid zone. And outside of that, there's not a ton of within that. There's not a ton of multiplicity. But then even outside of that, like other gap schemes, other different zone variations, there wasn't a ton on that standpoint. So when they're game planning the pass game. And I think the run game, obviously they're game planning too, but I think it's to a lesser degree.
When I talk to people about this offense, one thing that keeps coming up is we knew when they were going to run because they just had limited amounts of formations, personnel.
Very true. Very true.
If Josh Oliver was on the field, if Trent Sherfield was on the field, it's like they're running. And they would do a lot of, all right, we're going to run kind of out of a bunch, and then we're going to run the same play action out of that bunch. But at times it seemed like, especially the Rams, understood exactly when they were going to do those play actions and then sent corner blitzes off the bunch, which works really well. And I thought when we do this discussion about predictability, passing game, I don't think they're that predictable with their routes. You see all sorts of corners and safeties like scrambling.
Correct.
But I don't see too many people scrambling when they're running the football. And I think that if you're going to be simple and straightforward, that's fine. If you have beasts, If you have giants of men pushing human beings around, then you can say, all right, we're going to line up and you can't stop it. The Vikings have not had, are you going to line up, you can't stop it. I think there does need to be a little more misdirection is maybe that's way too basic of a word.
No,
but
that's fair.
Just,
that's fair.
right, like just eye candy, just, hey, look over there, and the run goes that way. Like, this is a simple game, right? I just feel like it was an obligation. Like, we have to run, I guess, because we can't pass every play, so fine, we'll call. And here's another thing, too. This has been a complaint, as you've noticed. First down, run. Maybe 55% of the time. Second down, absolutely no chance. No world where we're running on second down. If you can only run on one down ever with the same personnel, it's just way too predictable, I thought.
Yeah, no, the biggest thing that stuck out to me was, writing the book, I go game by game, and I clip every play, so I've got a library of cut-ups at the end, which is awesome from the coaching standpoint. But I think the biggest thing that's true about what you said, everything you said is true, but the biggest thing that I want to really focus on is the formation tendencies. And you can see that in the book too. Like when they get into condensed 3x1s, whether it be 11 or 12 personnel, there's a very, very high percentage chance that it's going to be a zone run either way or duo. And they have a couple play actions off those, but their play action stuff kind of branches out into other formations too. So it's like if you're the defense, you see those formations pre-snap, there's a darn good chance that it's going to be one of those three runs.
And the thing is with NFL teams, and I wrote a book too, Bobby. Football is a numbers game, and
Yes,
one of the things I learned while writing it was teams have so much data. They know every single formation, every single tendency, every single percentage, every single route combination you run out of a certain thing. They have all that data right there. So if you go into a game and they know, hey, they run 90% of their stuff out of these three formations, every time you see them, you know there's a really good chance at that. But I also try not to complain too much because they just had a 14-win season and a top 10 offense with Sam Darnold, right? But I think that but when we're talking about a championship standard for the team,
yes,
I don't think you can go into the playoffs and you start getting beat with a team's pass rush and they're getting upfield. They're thinking upfield, attack the quarterback, and you have no answer to be able to run the ball against them and try to keep them honest. I think that's really what happened in L.A. or Arizona against L.A. was that they just had no counterpunch to what L.A. was doing best.
No, you're exactly right. And I know we were kind of texting back and forth, too, about like what exactly happened in that game as far as like what did the Rams do to the pass game? Why were all these sacks? And like you look at each one, and I could point to one of them was Sam Darnold's fault. One of them was the O-line's fault. Missing a block, or one of them was the coverage, took away the first three receivers, and then the pocket got pushed onto Darnold. And another one is obviously the corner blitz we talked about. The offensive line just goofed up the slide on that one. So it was kind of like it was one bad thing after another, and people were taking turns messing up. And that's kind of what that looks like in the playoffs, right? If you're gonna, when you lose a playoff game, unless it's like super close down to the wire, it's gonna look sloppy like that. But to your point, if they want to take it to that championship level, pushing the envelope more with the different run schemes, and then their ability to do so and have answers for when defenses want to, hey, we got to pressure the quarterback. That's very spot on.
Now let me just throw a scenario at you. Let's just say that they signed Trey Smith, and I know everybody wants Trey Smith, but let's just say run blocker, top-notch run blocker, and they drafted Tyler Booker, who is a big, giant guard. How good could they make this thing? Like, how good could this offense be if you had two dudes at the guard position who were monsters?
Yeah, if you've got awesome personnel, you can run mid-zone, you can run outside zone strong and duo and just live with it, right? You don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need all the adjustments. When you can just say, hey, if we know this double team is going to get up to the mic, if we know we're going to be able to push, get to the perimeter when we run outside zone to two tight ends, like you don't have to do all that stuff, right? If you have elite personnel, so that would certainly help.
I mean, the whole offense. Like, what's the ceiling for the whole offense if they have a good, top? It's so hard to build an offensive line. If they had a top-notch, top 5 offensive line, how good can the offense be?
Oh, best in the league. There's no doubt.
You just drop the mic after. I own these mics. Don't drop them.
Yes, yeah. I figured you want me to do that.
That's a great way to walk off, though. Bobby Peters, the 2024 Vikings Complete Offensive Manual. It's coming out soon. Take a look for that. Might be out by the time this podcast runs. And Alert the Post is your newsletter. Let me tell you, this is for extreme football. Okay, this is as deep as a dive. I have given one of your books to Kevin O'Connell, literally. So that's how in depth that they are. So I appreciate your work, your insight, and maybe he'll check out some of your observations on the run game possibly when he gets a hold of this book. So thanks, dude. I really appreciate you stopping by Indianapolis, and best of luck with all the work here.
Appreciate that. Always good to catch up.
Football. You want to say football just for everybody?
Football.